A proclamation. Can we, as a society, please refrain from using the F word? An invitation to remember. For most of American broadcast history, you could not say the F word on television. Not once. Not on the news, not in a sitcom, not in a live interview. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a federal law enforced by the Federal Communications Commission because as a culture we had agreed this word does not belong in the public square. Hollywood built its own version of the same line. To this day, a movie can use the F word exactly once as a plain expletive, nothing sexual, and still keep its PG-13 rating. Use it twice and the rating automatically jumps to R. One word, one free pass. That's how seriously the industry itself has treated this, not because anyone was being delicate, but because everyone understood the word still meant something. That's the world I grew up in, believing in, and it's the world I still choose to live in. Somewhere along the way, a lot of people stopped remembering that this was ever the standard. It could be a function of age. I recently sat in on a business webinar, a professional training from a man selling expertise on buying companies, and counted the F word used 8 times in the first 13 minutes. Not in anger, not in a moment of crisis, as a comma, a filler, as apparently a personality. I left the presentation after 13 minutes of a meeting scheduled for 90 minutes. I don't need their information badly enough to endure the barrage, and I got to thinking about why that bothered me as much as it did. The word doesn't mean less, it's just being spent carelessly. Here's the thing about a word like that. Its power comes from scarcity. It's supposed to be an expletive when you intend to convey something big and rare, like when you smash your thumb or when you get terrible news, when something genuinely shocking happens. That's what gives it weight. When someone drops it like a stock adjective every third sentence, our effing process, an effing great deal, they haven't become more comfortable with strong language. They've spent it down to nothing. Linguists call this semantic bleaching. A word loses its force through overuse until it's just noise. It's the same reason literally doesn't mean literally anymore. So when that presenter someday actually smashes his thumb or gets truly furious or has a real brush with tragedy, what's left in the vault? He already spent his emergency word describing a forgettable and unimportant process. Older than you think. Newer to movies than you'd guess. I used to assume this word was a product of the 1970s because that's when I first started hearing it. I was wrong. Just not in the direction you'd expect. The word has been documented in writing since 1475 in a satirical poem and was formally recorded in a published dictionary by 1598. It is, quite literally, older than Shakespeare's later plays. I could chalk up hearing it in the 70s to simply getting older and being exposed to more of the world. But there's more precise explanation, and it isn't just a function of age. Cable television, specifically premium channels like HBO, which had launched in 1972 but didn't reach scale until it went nationally by satellite in 1975. They didn't explode into American living rooms until the late 70s and early 80s, about the same time I was a teenager. HBO went from a regional curiosity to roughly 4 million subscribers by 1979, then past 10 million by the early 80s. And because those premium channels operated outside FCC's decency rules, they could air uncut, unedited, R-rated films, profanity and all, straight into people's homes for the first time. Before that, the only place you'd hear this word was in mixed company, or brought into your home by whoever was standing in your living room saying it out loud. It was never piped in from the outside, over the airwaves, uninvited. That changed on a national scale right around the time I started hearing it. That's not a coincidence. That's the moment the funnel opened. Here's what's actually striking. For roughly 500 years, it stayed almost entirely out of print, and it never once appeared in a movie, not a single frame, until 1967, when it showed up briefly in a British film adaptation of a novel. It didn't become common in American movies until the 1970s. Think about that. Thousands of films were made, entire decades of American and world cinema, without it. Not because filmmakers lacked the vocabulary, because it was understood industry-wide as something you simply don't put on screen. That's not a slow cultural drift. That's a collapse. It doesn't even mean anything anymore. Here's something worth sitting with. The F word started as a verb, a specific verb referring to sex. That's its actual, literal meaning. But listen to how it's used today. It's been stretched into an adjective, the effing meeting, an adverb, effing ridiculous, a noun, don't be an effer, an entire sentence on its own, F it, and a command that taken literally doesn't even make sense. Tell someone to go F themselves, and what are you actually instructing them to do? Say F you? And are you sincerely proposing that the word originally meant, or is it just now noise, detached from its own definition? Call someone an effing idiot, and ask yourself, idiot in what sexual sense exactly? None. The word has been used so often in so many grammatical positions that have nothing to do with its actual meaning, that most of the time doesn't even mean anything at all. It's just a commonly used word that rarely makes sense in the way it is being used. That should be disqualifying on its own. We're not even talking about a word that's doing real, meaningful, if crude, work in a sentence. We're talking about a word so overused it's become semantically empty. People are cursing with the word, said correctly, no longer even communicates what it was built to communicate. That's not edgy. That's just linguistic laziness dressed up as parroting others. Pervasive does not mean acceptable. I understand the argument because I hear it consistently. Everybody talks like this now. It's just how people communicate. Get used to it. I reject that. Something being common doesn't make it correct, and it certainly doesn't make it professional. A word can be everywhere, in movies, in boardrooms, on every TikTok video you scroll past, and still be exactly what it's always been: vulgar, careless, and beneath the standard we should be holding each other to in public and professional life. I want to be clear about something. This isn't a call to police private speech, and it isn't a claim that people who use the word are bad people, although it does say a lot about a person, as all other word choices say about a person. It's also a claim about judgment and self-mastery in public settings, in a business pitch, on stage, in front of a camera, in a room where you're asking people to trust you with their money, their time, their attention. If you can't make it through a presentation without leaning on a foul curse word, that tells your audience something about your preparation, your discipline, and your lack of sensitivity regarding a historically and presently unacceptable FCC swear word in mixed company. This isn't nostalgia, it's a choice you can still make. I'm not asking anyone to pretend that the word doesn't exist or that culture hasn't shifted. It's obvious it has. I'm asking for something smaller and I think more honest. Stop treating everyone does it as the same thing as it's fine. It was considered unacceptable in professional and public life for centuries, not because people were fragile, but because we've long understood that some registers of speech deserve better than the laziest word available. You don't have to accept being worn down by sheer repetition, being surrounded by something that doesn't obligate you to tolerate, and it certainly doesn't obligate you to join in. And here's the piece of good news worth remembering. That broadcast standard never actually went away. Right now, today, you still cannot air the F word on network television during hours when children might be watching. The FCC's rule is still on the books, still enforced. Somewhere in this culture, a line has been held. A previous generation recognizes the word is not okay to use in front of children. A higher standard is also an act of respect. There's one more thing worth naming honestly. This word isn't only filler. It's also the word many reach for first when they want to tear someone down. It's the go-to insult, the word attached to rage, to contempt, to the worst things people say to each other in their angriest moments. The same word that becomes meaningless as a comma in a business pitch is still, underneath all that overuse, a word that still wounds. So the invitation isn't just watch your language, it's bigger than that. Every time we choose a sharper, more deliberate word instead of reaching for the laziest and crudest one, we're making a small statement about how much we respect the people in the room. The client, the congregation, the coworker, the stranger scrolling past us online, Words are one of the few things we get to choose on purpose dozens of times a day. What we choose says something about what we think other people deserve from us. Collectively, we can lift the standard back up, not by shaming anyone into silence, and not by pretending the last 50 years didn't happen, but by simply deciding one conversation at a time that people around us are worth much better than our laziest word. That's not nostalgia, that's not prudishness, that's just respect, practiced on purpose in a culture that largely is forgotten it's a choice at all. Remember, it's not been okay for over 400 years. Let that sink in. Only over the last 50 have we collectively allowed it to not be only tolerated, but acceptable and in many cases embraced. We've gotten lazy and desensitized. It seems to me that as a society we have been beaten down and numbed by its frequency and overuse. It doesn't have to remain this way, and given the pace of the decline, it doesn't have to get even worse. Can we all please try to refrain from using it so casually, if at all? Let's not make it a word that we reach out for in repetition or lack of meaningful vocabulary. Choose better, not because the word is forbidden, but because people you're speaking to are worth the effort, and we all deserve a higher standard of respectful communication.